Hello, hello. We are back, man. If you want stress, take the last bite of your breakfast during the 10-second countdown to a live stream starting. Oh my goodness.
Uh,
Excuse me.
all's well. I'm back after 2 weeks off. I assumed that everybody missed having me on the show.
Everyone missed having you on the show. It was truly terrible without you here. Actually, that's not true. Last week we had Drew and Jason and on. It was really fantastic.
Yeah.
Just a fantastic stream talking about new things that have been happening in cybersecurity and the ransomware report that is now out. And as a reminder, there is still the webinar that was done for the great report that you can go watch. So go to guidepointsecurity.com and check that out if you are looking for some deeper insights into what's happening in ransomware over the last quarter. But we also have some updates on stories that we talked about. But most importantly, Jonathan, how are you doing? Are you well? Are you recovered? Are you rested? Are you ready to talk?
So down here in Tampa, we hosted our charity golf event yesterday. And so big shout out to all of those viewers that are tuning in right now that participated in the event, all of those partners of ours that participated in the event. We had a great time, raised a ton of money for charity, and looking forward to next year's golf event.
Awesome. Well, that sounds great. I'm glad that you got to go have some fun and do some good. All of those things are great. But we have some awesome stories this week to go through. And before we do that, we want to make sure that we put it out there that the views and opinions Jonathan and I express are our own. They're not necessarily GuidePoint Security's direct views. We're just two guys talking about cybersecurity. And with some of the stories that we've got this week, we want to emphasize that because everything that's happening is interesting. We've had some really fun things happen this week. First and foremost, how do you feel about net neutrality?
Personally, now that we put the disclaimer out of the way,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan. The internet should be free. Information should be free.
Yep.
No one particular set of information should be prioritized over any other. And again, if you share this opinion with me, please let me know down in the comments. Otherwise, let me know down in the comments.
Absolutely.
How about you, Tristan?
I love net neutrality. I think it's an extremely important thing in today's day and age. When we have massive companies that really control the majority of what we can see on the internet here in the US, I think that legally mandating that they maintain neutrality and not prioritize content is extremely important. Now, that can be a divisive opinion sometimes, but this week it was announced that the FCC has reinstated Title II for internet service providers and is returning to net neutrality.
This is something we definitely celebrate. Again, the kind of the bigger picture here is that there was a green light given to allow potentially different data prioritization, to allow different types of connectivity opportunities for certain types of businesses. And by coming back to our roots and just saying, look, like this is the internet as a whole, and no one particular thing gets the express lane, as they were, isn't that like one of the euphemisms they were trying to always sell it as, and all this other fun stuff.
Yeah.
But it's so much more than that, right? We're seeing the FCC not just taking on net neutrality and bringing that back to the masses, but also considering security along the way, right?
Right, exactly. So that's the interesting thing about this particular story that we're talking about today, coming to us from Cyberscoop, is the fact that not only has the FCC restored the net neutrality doctrine and remandated that. Now, a big thing with that is that under Title II, right, the FCC has the authority to make certain decisions about things that are classified under Title II status, right? So they can mandate pricing caps, and they can mandate minimum service requirements, which we actually just had something that we touched on briefly a couple weeks ago, was the fact that the definition of what was considered broadband had been upped, right? So the minimum now was the minimum speed was considerably faster. And so with that, though, also comes the fact that if something is Title II, that means that it is common carrier and that it is something that the majority of citizens are expected to be able to access. And with that comes security. And so under the new ruling on restoring its Title II, this allows the FCC to actually start taking action on something called BGP, which is Border Gateway Protocol. Which is just the technical rules of routing on the back end of the internet, right? So the FCC chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel, I believe that's how you pronounce her last name. They had a blog post last year describing the inadequacies of security around BGP. Now, Jonathan, I always love to leave the technical stuff and descriptions up to you because you describe it so much better than I do. So, why is BGP important?
Yeah, and to also add to that, everybody's favorite CISA agency director, Jen Easterly, was also part of that conversation.
Yeah.
Hey, Jen, if you're listening. So BGP is super critical. It's basically the backbone of the internet. Now, we say backbone in a sense, figuratively, but this BGP protocol is the rules and sets of how to get from point A to point B on the internet. Think about all of those fiber optic lines and hubs and undersea cables that are traversing the entire globe right now. And so there has to be some kind of routing system, some kind of management system to say, well, if you're trying to get to this IP address, it's all the way over there. You're going to go boom, 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 and hop along across the internet. Now, with this, as wonderful as this sounds in theory, there are still a number of little kind of intricacies that come with it. One of those, though, sadly, is the ability to do what we call a BGP hijack. That's stepping in the middle of this conversation of saying, hey, I know that the IP you're looking for is all the way over there, but I'm going to go ahead and hijack this and say it's actually in this other direction, or intentionally route you somewhere that you didn't want to necessarily go. This opens up a ton of different issues and vulnerabilities on the internet, mostly specific to the fact that if your data is now routing over a line of traffic that's being snooped on or inspected, that means there's a potential that that data can be, exfiltrated from the conversation, and threat actors can take advantage of this. There's also the possibility of landing on the wrong side of the internet, and nobody wants to do that.
Yeah, no one wants to wind up there. And also, the fact that it also allows, if someone is routing through that third party network and doing the snooping as well, right? They can also do things like the exact opposite of what net neutrality is intended to do, right? And they can edit that content. They can make sure that certain things don't reach the intended recipients. Like at a certain level, I relate it to the fact that I run a Raspberry Pi on my own network, right? I have my Pi hole set up that takes all of the ad traffic that comes across the internet and routes it into infinity, right? And just make sure that I never see it. So if someone were able to take control of BGP and reroute that, they could just say, oh, you know what? I don't like these specific stories, these URLs, these things. We're just going to make sure that that never makes it to anybody. So it's really interesting to see them not only reinstating net neutrality, but also taking a firm stance on BGP and trying to secure that. And there is a little bit of pushback though coming from a few different groups. So the Internet Society, it's a nonprofit that advocates for an open and secure internet, which is great. And also some other groups have expressed their concerns to the FCC about essentially the fact that allowing the federal government to be the one creating rules and regulations around this means that it is going to be a slow process, which means when something new happens, right, that it has to go through that regulation process first before anything can be enacted. Now, there is a little bit of doom and gloom, I think, in that, right? I think it is a little pessimistic to believe that if a new threat were to pop up and new solutions were to be proposed, that somehow there would be opposition to implementing those solutions to handle things while the process of approval is going on in the background. We've done that multiple times in recent years with multiple different threats across a spectrum of categories, right? Saying like, we're going to give conditional approval to this thing to move forward. But that also, I think, points to another potential issue, which is it's separate, right? So saying, oh, well, the government red tape might slow down potential solutions. It's like, okay, well, then we should work with the FCC as cybersecurity practitioners to say, how do we create a council or a board that oversees this and can move rapidly on these things, can make those quick rubber stamp decisions to say, like, this is a threat, it needs to be handled. Go ahead and rubber stamp that while we figure out the logistics on the back end. I think that there's actually a lot of really great room there for us as cybersecurity practitioners to come together and try and work on something like that with the federal government, to say, like, it's impossible for the federal government to move as quickly as it needs to in certain circumstances, especially something like cyber. So why don't we have actual cybersecurity professionals be in charge of making those kinds of quick decisions while the red tape gets worked out?
Yeah, now this reminds me of a conversation I had the other day, which was that sloth scene from Zootopia at the DMV.
Right.
And all right. And
sorry, I just love that sloth so much.
It was great, isn't it? And I'm about to laugh at the punchline to this joke here in a second too. But BGP hijacking isn't necessarily a new technique. This has been around for many years, and it's good to see that we're finally starting to try to get a grasp on it. Remember that the FCC did consider, talking about BGP security a couple years back in 2022, and so this is something that's been in the works. But we got to remember, that's not just something that we can solve here within the United States. This is a global protocol, it's a global presence.
Yep.
And so there are still a number of countries out there that may see the opportunity to hijack BGP routes as a positive for them. And may not want to necessarily participate or move in this direction. There's also the fact that if you think that we're slow to get things done, you'd be surprised how many other people are probably slower. And so I know that I'll be keeping an eye on this, especially because we've covered BGP hijacks routes in our show in the past. And so hopefully we can put that particular topic of story to rest here soon.
Yeah, hopefully. But we need to move on here. We've taken some time on this story. If you'd like to read more about it, we've dropped the link into the comments on the video. And also, we'd love to hear your thoughts about net neutrality and the FCC's opinions on BGP. But what we want to move on to now is the return of an old friend.
Your friend, not mine.
who's also bringing some company along with them, but the return of an old tactic. So Jonathan, what's going on here? Because you found this one for us.
Yeah, and coming to us from an article from the Hacker News, and kind of a secondary play to this from Bleeping Computer, is the good old job lures. And what I mean by this is it's an absolutely crazy market right now. If anybody's out there hunting for a new job, you know the pressure, you know the challenges that's coming with it. And so there are a number of different organizations around the world. A lot of threat actors are seeing this as kind of a current event, and they are jumping in and they're saying, well, why don't you interview with me? And why don't you, prove to me that you are good for the job? And so our first story talks about a particular rat called the Cowlin rat. And what's happening here is part of that interview process is you're given an ISO, one of those virtual CD files that you're expected to download. Once you download that, what's inside is what appears to be an Amazon VNC client or an Amazon remote desktop client. Sadly, this whole thing is malicious, as you could imagine, and it triggers a series of different bits of malware that are installed, backdoored onto your system, right, communicating with C2, right, command and control servers, and basically have full access to everything on your computer. So it's no good at all. But that's just one of the many tactics. I'll go ahead and jump real quickly into the technical of the other aspect. This particular one is targeted at a lot of those developers out there that are looking for jobs, right? You may not necessarily be in a security role like Tristan and I, but what about coders? Well, this other tactic that we're starting to see from another particular group, what they're doing is they're sending out what's called an NPM package. These things are part of Node.js. You're apparently, if you're a developer, you're given this file and you're told, please integrate this file into a nice JavaScript program. Sadly, well, again, when you run this stuff on your computer, it's pretty much game over.
Yeah. So it's the return of these styles of campaigns is troubling in a market, a job market like the one that we have right now, right? So especially with the number of layoffs that we're seeing across the tech
Yeah.
industry, these kinds of people are particularly vulnerable right now to this kind of tech. Many people are desperate. I have friends who have been searching for jobs for 8 months or more, trying to find anything, even just like a standard like IT role. But the important thing about this is that because that job landscape is so tumultuous right now, you also have people who currently have jobs, still, keeping their options open and checking in with job offers that they receive. So if they are the ones who are getting hit by this as well, that means that really critical files are being exposed through these particular routes of attack. Sorry, I'm trying to also drop these into comments for
No, you're fine. You're fine.
our viewers,
Yeah,
to be able to follow along.
One of the key details here is that this isn't the first time that we're seeing this type of social engineering, especially in the job marketplace. In the reverse, we've also seen players from the Lazarus Group try to infiltrate American organizations by applying to domestic jobs. What they'll do is they'll use stolen identities to then try to participate in an interview process, land maybe a developer job within a large organization, and then go after that company, whether it's the intellectual property or performing other forms of ransomware against the target. Keep in mind that Lazarus Group is one of the main key funding routes for North Korea, and so their creative aspects of trying to target individuals, whether it's finding people, and like you said, in this case, that may already work somewhere, and being able to bridge from that individual to a larger organization, or as I mentioned, as we've seen in the past, try to just simply work their way into a company. This is definitely going to be a very challenging one because it's a virtual world we're living in. We're not doing face-to-face interviews. We're not going to meet somebody at a coffee shop to see if they're going to be a qualified candidate or visit them at their office. In this remote world, there's a lot of benefits to all of it, but this is definitely going to be one of those downfalls.
Yeah, and it's the Lazarus Group route specifically, like you said, being a major funding path for North Korea and state actors, right? I think that we can probably expect to see this a lot more. It's pretty clear that Lazarus Group invested quite a bit in this new attack path that they're using, and this new infrastructure that they have set up, and the way that they're going about this. And it's important to remember, right? Like as a state funded group, they have access to those resources, but they're not the only state funded group that is out there. And it would be even easier for countries that are closer to how am I trying to say this? Countries that have even closer cultural ties to the U.S. And cultural similarity to the U.S., right? It would not be much now that these attack paths are out there and proving fruitful, for them to emulate this style of attack and make it even more dangerous because it could appear even more convincing to your average developer. So it's important to stay vigilant around these things, and I think kind of within our society and the structure that we have built around employment and jobs, it would probably be considered taboo. But I do think that it's actually important for companies to even say like, hey, we understand that job offers come in, and we understand that you are, as an employee, probably going to look at those job offers, right? Like it's kind of foolish to think otherwise. And so much like we would not just ignore the threat of phishing emails or ignore the threat of malicious documents and attachments and things like that, we give employees training on these things constantly. I would almost say that we need to start integrating this kind of training as well, to say like, hey, can you tell a real job offer from a fake job offer? And almost establishing etiquette, right? Like forms of etiquette for standardization across industries, to say like, hey, like we should not, as legitimate job offers, ask potential candidates to do X, Y, and Z. We should make sure that that's the thing we never ask them to do, so that when a fake job offer comes up that would require the attacker to ask them to do that kind of thing, they can tell that it's fake right away, right? So saying like, hey, we should never ask employees to install a program. We should never ask employees to do XYZ, right? And that way, if someone says, hey, I need you to install this so that we can talk about this job securely, it's like, no, absolutely not. I know that right away. But I would say it's probably important for us to start engaging and training around this idea and this concept. It might be taboo within that, like I said, that employment structure, to talk about the potential of going to find other jobs, but this is clearly something that's going to be a problem moving forward.
Now, without foreshadowing too much, one of the things that kind of came to mind, though, is, well, maybe if you're not necessarily sending somebody a file, but what if they're downloading it from an authorized source on the internet?
Yeah.
Maybe there's still a challenge behind that too.
Yeah, maybe there's still a challenge for downloading that. So we talked about this last week a little bit with Drew and Jason and the Grit team, but the idea of supply chain attacks and their complexity, and specifically we talked about the XZ Utils backdoor that was discovered.
This is huge.
This is it's absolutely huge. It rivals SolarWinds on its exploitability is not the word that I'm trying to come up with, but it's all that my brain is giving me right now.
Well, like the breadth of proliferation that's happening amongst this it's very vast. It is not an isolated incident by any means.
Yep, exactly. So we talked about it last week. It was discovered and made public. But I think what I want to talk about specifically with XZ Utils and the backdoor that was discovered was the way that it was discovered. And the way that it was executed moving forward. So for anyone who's not familiar, right, we talked about the backbone of the internet with BGP. You want to talk about the backbone of the internet? How about every Linux server ever that is running anything to do with the internet? Yeah. Those are right. Everything out there, everyone watching this is probably familiar with the fact that Linux is free and open source, and free and open source things are maintained by volunteers. And so for a lot of these things that we rely on as the backbone of utilities and tools for these systems, sometimes it's just one guy who is taking care of something. And that's what happened with XZ Utils. So the sole maintainer of the XZ Utils project, Lass Collins, was for years and years and years maintaining this single tool that a majority of servers that run the internet were running and keeping operating, and everyone was just kind of relying on the goodwill of Lass to continue that. But in 2021, a new person who uses the handle Giatan, who I've heard kind of rumblings and grumblings as I've been watching the story that like very likely state sponsored, right? This was a very likely state sponsored event. So someone with the handle Giatan started suggesting changes and fixes and patches for XZ Utils in 2021. And then Lass Collins began merging those into the utility. So someone came in and said, hey, I would love to help with this. Started offering suggestions for how to fix certain things. Those were merged in, and they were all good commits is the important thing, right? This was good code. This was good stuff that was being put in. And then some other people began pressuring Lass to make Giatan an official maintainer. And they started doing these good commits and these good changes so often that they became a trusted source within the community until they finally recently introduced a change that created a backdoor within XZ Utils that would have given access to all of those servers that run the backbone of the internet.
Yeah, it's absolutely that. It's trying to gain the trust, it's trying to push and put pressure and persist and all that fun, crazy stuff. And it's crazy how you were mentioning, it was discovered by an individual from Microsoft of all places, right? The opposite end of operating systems.
Nerds save the internet again. I want to say.
There's your title. There we go. But yeah, we're starting to really figure out what happened here. We're starting to get an understanding of how this kind of started to play out. As you can see, it's a low and slow. 2021, that's a multi-year game of gaining trust, having multiple actors at play here, or at least their personas, pushing this through, and ultimately getting their malicious thing committed. Now, just in case everybody's wondering, well, what does this have to do with Linux and anything? Well, when you push packages and you maintain packages that are part of a distribution in Linux, they ultimately land on all of those systems that perform updates. And so just like Windows updates, the maintainers of these packages push them to an official repository. And these official repositories then are used as a primary source for receiving updates across all the different Linux systems. And so this XZ package landed on a repository as if the code was legit and good. And all these systems, whether automatic or manual, began downloading it onto their operating system. And so if you can imagine how many of these different OSs, we're talking Fedora, Debian, Kali, OpenSUSE, Arch. I mean, they all had the backdoored library, and right, it huge, totally huge,
absolutely massive. And what I also want to touch on a little bit is right. So one, there's the cybersecurity lesson here, right? Don't commit to prod until you've done some testing. But that is exactly what saved us in this instance. So if you're watching this and you're old enough, you remember Y2K and the fact that there was a big hullabaloo about the fact that everything was going to shut down when the clocks rolled over at midnight in the year 2000 because clocks were not programmed correctly, right? Like that's the most basic explanation of it. And then it didn't happen. And there are a ton of people out there who think like, it was all overblown. There was never an issue. But really what it was that there was a giant team of engineers working around the clock to fix things leading up to that, to patch every system that they possibly could. And that fixed it. And so in this case, we have the same exact thing that led to that led to finding out about this backdoor. And what it is that developer at Microsoft, I love this so much because it's the nerdiest way to find this, was just really committed to benchmarking. And so he had been maintaining a log of benchmark data about like how long does it take things like XZ Utils to compile before he deploys them.
Wasn't it? It was part of the library being part of SSH, and he was like, this SSH function took a half a second too long.
Yeah, it was like milliseconds longer than it normally would, and he saw that and was like, huh, that's out of scope. And so he started digging into why potentially that could have happened, and found this backdoor there and immediately alerted everyone. And that went out so quickly, that word spread so fast, that while 2%, I believe, is the last number that I heard, is still a massive number of servers given the number that are out there that deployed this. It was limited to this incredibly small subset of what it could have been because it was caught so quickly. And I just think that's incredible.
No, I love it. I totally do love it. I think I think we definitely should take these last couple minutes here to throw these rapid fire stories out there.
Let's throw these rapid fire stories out there. So the first one, because it dovetails directly into this, right? Dangerous GitHub comments and GitLab comments. This is really interesting. We were just talking about downloading things from legitimate looking sources. Hackers have discovered that they can create phishing links that are incredibly legitimate looking by going into GitLab and GitHub and leaving comments on projects and uploading files to those comments. What happens is Git automatically creates a link to their content delivery network that has the whole project repository and stuff inside of that link, so it looks incredibly official. They don't even have to post the comment itself. They just have to draft the comment with a piece of malware attached to it, get that link, and then they can start sending that out to people, asking them to go check something out, and it'll automatically download that malware from the content delivery network. Really clever, really simple backdoor that they discovered there, and I think we'll probably see that patched pretty quickly.
Yeah, we've definitely seen the ability of people to take advantage of a known domain by being able to upload files to it and then gaining that credibility, right? We saw this actually a number of years ago with some .gov websites too, where you could upload a file or perform a link click-through to move to a different website.
Yeah.
And because it's a .gov, why couldn't you trust it? Well, in this case, it's GitLab. Why couldn't you trust it?
It's a Git commit from Microsoft. It's Microsoft's repository. Another interesting one, though, rapid fire, there's a new campaign out there called Toddycat that is circulating around, which I accidentally did not open up the link for on my.
It's okay. I got it up here.
All right, thanks.
But basically, what's happening here is this is a very particular threat, classified as an APT in this case, but it's meant to go after industrial scale, specifically from the government and defense areas. Now, this is being found to target mostly the Asian Pacific market, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't still at least be on the outlook. And the fact of the matter is, we can see this kind of really focused, targeted stuff going after what's known historically as a potentially vulnerable and weak in security, kind of place. You're talking about systems that are decades old, can't be updated, can't be shut off.
Yeah.
Things that are purpose built, that security is probably coming in third or fourth, functionality and safety first. When it comes to industrial complex water utility, thing of that nature. So the continued growth in that area is definitely something to keep an eye out for. But our last story real quickly, and this is something that's hitting waves everywhere, is AI. This particular story coming to us from the Register is about an individual who got arrested impersonating the principal of a school that he worked at.
Yeah, so there was an audio clip that made the rounds and made waves in a small community in Baltimore when this audio clip went viral on social media of a principal allegedly in a meeting using really horribly racist language.
Awful.
Yeah, like really saying really terrible things. And then when the school board went to investigate, he was like, I have never had this conversation. The person who was purportedly on the other end of that conversation said, this never happened. So they put him on administrative leave. And it turns out that who the cops have just arrested was the athletic director at the school, who was having work-related problems with this principal. And so they created the whole conversation using AI and voice synthesis, emailed it to themselves and a couple other teachers who were kind of on their side. One of those teachers then forwarded it to a student on social media, and that student then propagated it out across everything. And they were able to track this back. What my favorite part of this is that one of the ways that they pinned this on the athletic director is they had his phone number associated with everything. They went and looked up details about his devices connecting to the school network, and he had been Googling things like how to generate voice AI. Which is really, I think, hilarious. It always comes down to like, clear your cookies, everybody.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But that's it for the week.
That brings us to the end of our show. Thank you so much for watching. If you are watching on demand, we really appreciate your time. Go ahead and let us know what you thought of the stories in the comments. We love hearing from you guys, and we love taking those things into account as we look for more stories. But until next week, I have been and will continue to be Tristan Morris.
And I am Jonathan Singer.
And we will catch you all next time.